My name is Hazel Rhodes. I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, people have described me as the responsible one. They mean it as a compliment. Most days, it feels more like a warning label. I'm a single mom of two Zoe, who just turned 8 and asks questions like she's hosting a podcast, and Max, who's 5 and believes gravity is optional if a couch looks jumpable. They're chaos and joy in a pair of tiny sneakers, and they're the reason I get up every morning even when I haven't slept. Ever since my ex-husband and I split 3 years ago, it's been the three of us navigating life together. I've learned how to pack lunches while tightening loose cabinet hinges, how to wash Zoe's hair without letting conditioner sting her eyes, how to pretend I'm not exhausted when Max whispers one more story with a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. I don't do everything right, but I show up every day for them. My family, they show up only when it reflects well on them. I grew up in a house where the carpets were spotless, but the conversations had stains no one dared scrub out. My dad worked in finance, crisp suits, crisp rules, crisp judgments. My mom was a substitute teacher who never took a permanent position because she liked keeping options open, though the only option she ever chose was whatever made her look good. And then there was my younger sister, Julia, the golden child, the darling. The one who could spill milk on the rug, and somehow I'd be the one asked to clean it up. Julia could scream, cry, break something, forget something. My parents would make excuses for her like it was a sport. But me, if I so much as sighed too loudly, I'd get a lecture about being dramatic. When we became adults, I stopped trying to earn a medal in a race I was never allowed to win. I moved out at 20 and poured my life into building a small home renovation business. Nothing flashy but honest work. Stripping floors, repainting walls, fixing things people don't even remember breaking. I bought a home, maintained the family cabin my grandfather left us, saved what I could, and raised 2 kids who laughed freely, even if no one else in the family understood them. Julia, meanwhile, stayed close to home, married her high school sweetheart. No kids, worked in some vague tech-adjacent job my parents bragged about without knowing a thing about it. She and her husband lived 20 minutes from my parents. They visited every week. My parents watered their plants, walked their dog, spoiled them like they were royalty. Me, Mom, once forgot Max's birthday and said, "Oh, honey, remind me next time." Yet every year I showed up for the annual family holiday party. Tradition, they said. Obligatory warmth. Julia hosted now. Her house looked like a showroom designed by someone allergic to clutter and children. I always brought Zoe and Max. They're part of this family, even if the family tries to pretend otherwise. Last year, Zoe wrote a little reindeer song and sang it after dinner. No applause, not even a polite smile. Julia was too busy showing Dad some overpriced kitchen gadget. Mom was watching my niece's TikTok video on loop like it was Shakespeare. I knelt next to Zoe afterward, whispering, "I thought it was beautiful." She hugged me and whispered back, "I liked it, even if they didn't." That sentence lived in my chest for 11 months. So when the group chat for the holiday party popped up in early December, I replied the same as always. Me plus 2. We'll bring cookies. Silence. No one responded. 2 days later, Mom called, not to say hi, not to ask how I was, just, "Hazel, we were wondering. Maybe this year you could come without the kids." I blinked so hard I thought my eyelashes might fall off. "I'm sorry, what?" Well, she hesitated. Last year there were spills, noise. Julia's house isn't childproof, and we just want this year to go smoothly. Smoothly, I repeated the word sharp as broken glass. "We don't want drama," she added softly. That phrase stuck in my brain like a thorn. No drama. I could practically hear Julia breathing over the phone, coaching Mom on every word. So I said slowly, "I'm not welcome unless I come alone." We're not saying that she replied too quickly. We're just saying it would be best. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg them to let my children. Their grandchildren exist inside a house we never asked to be invited into. I simply said noted and hung up. That night, I didn't tell Zoe or Max anything. What was there to say? Your grandparents think you're too inconvenient for their decor, that you disrupt their perfect aesthetic. No. I let the hurt settle deep, smoldering quietly. 2 days later, Julia posted a photo on Facebook, her, my parents, her husband, in matching flannel pajamas in front of a perfect tree. The caption read, "Family only. Peace at last." My hand didn't shake, not even a little. I typed, "Perfect. So the taxes, bills, and maintenance are yours now." 10 minutes later, the post vanished like it never existed. My phone lit up nonstop. Mom, Dad, Julia, Mom again, Dad again. Unknown numbers that had to be Julia using her work phone. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched Zoe and Max hang their felt stockings on our fireplace. Max hummed something off key. Zoe laughed at him. Adrian, my boyfriend of nearly a year, sat on the couch helping them sort ornaments. He looked up at me with quiet concern. "You okay?" he mouthed. I nodded, but the truth was something inside me had shifted hard. As the kids giggled over a crooked paper snowflake, a very calm, very precise thought crystallized. If they don't want us, then they don't get us. And they don't get anything I've been holding together for them either. Slow revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from clarity. And I was suddenly painfully clear. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry, though there was plenty of that, but because something else kept tapping at my thoughts, a quiet realization I'd ignored for years. My family had never actually wanted me. They had only wanted what I did for them. There's a difference, a big one, and once you finally feel it, you can't unfeel it. The next morning, my phone looked like a call center meltdown. 20 missed calls, 11 voicemails, 7 texts. None from anyone who cared about how I felt, just people scrambling because the person they depended on stopped behaving predictably. I silenced the phone and turned its screen down on the counter. Adrian was making pancakes for Zoe and Max, humming as he flipped the last one onto the plate. He didn't ask about the calls. He didn't press. He just said, "I made extra. Thought you might want one." That quiet understanding was something I wasn't used to. I sat beside him at the kitchen island while Max told us an elaborate story about how pancake syrup makes you run faster. Adrian laughed in all the right places. Zoe rolled her eyes dramatically. For 30 minutes, I let myself breathe in something warm, something that felt like a family that chose each other instead of performing obligation. But once the kids ran off to build a blanket fort, Adrian finally spoke. "You've been quiet since last night. You want to tell me what happened?" I stared down at my plate. They don't want the kids at Christmas. Adrian froze mid-reach for his coffee. "What?" "They asked me to come alone," said the kids complicate things. His jaw tightened in that slow, dangerous way he gets when something genuinely upsets him. "Hazel, that's..." I know I said, cutting him off gently, and I'm done explaining it. I'm just done. He reached over and rested his hand on my thumb, brushing my knuckles. "You don't have to go. You know that, right?" "I know," I whispered. And for the first time, I realized I didn't want to go, not anymore. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was clarifying. He squeezed my hand once more before letting me go. After he left for work and the kids settled into a movie, I finally picked up my phone. Unknown number. "Hey, it's Julia. Call me back." "Mom, sweetheart, you're overreacting. Let's talk." "Dad, let's not make this bigger than it is." Their texts read like a script they'd all memorized, minimize, deflect, erase. So predictable. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the closet, reached for the fireproof safe I hadn't touched in months, and carried it to the dining table. It was heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just finally ready to feel its weight. Inside were documents most of my family had forgotten existed or had never bothered to learn about in the first place. The deed to the lake cabin my grandfather left to the grandchildren, plural. The last 10 years of utility bills, all paid by me. Emails with contractors, receipts for repairs. Photos of broken pipes Julia caused during a girls' weekend she blamed on humidity. And at the bottom, the most important piece, the LLC paperwork listing me as the sole managing partner. Not co-manager, not co-owner, not shared authority, sole. When Grandpa died, everyone argued for months about who should maintain the cabin. Julia swore she'd help, but was too busy. My parents insisted they'd check on it monthly, which turned into quarterly, then yearly, then never. So I stepped in. I created an LLC for tax and liability reasons and filed it legally. They didn't care, or notice, or read. They were relieved someone else was handling the responsibility. Everyone knew the cabin existed. No one knew who actually ran it. And suddenly after that Facebook caption, they wanted to take it all from me. I began scanning everything, labeling it neatly in folders. Not to attack them, not even to confront them, but because I needed a timeline, a clean record, evidence of every moment I'd carried a family that had never carried me. Halfway through scanning, my phone rang. The one name I didn't expect lit up the screen. Aunt Marie, my mom's older sister, brutally honest, allergic to sugarcoating. She spent most of her time in Florida and only flew up for holidays with an opinion ready for every meal. I answered, "Hi, Aunt Marie." She didn't even say hello. "Are you really not coming to the Christmas party? Your mother said you made a scene." I sat back, eyebrows raised. "A scene?" "She said you hung up on her and overreacted. But I've known your mother for 65 years, Hazel. She downplays things." What really happened? So I told her everything. The phone call, the no kids request, the Facebook post, the caption. She didn't interrupt me once, except for occasional slurps of what was definitely wine, not coffee. When I finished, she let out a slow, simmering breath. They told me you didn't want to come, she said. Said the kids were sick and you were too busy. And Julia... She paused, voice sharpening. Julia said it was probably for the best because it meant less chaos. I nearly threw my biscotti at her. My chest tightened. They really said that. Oh, honey, Aunt Marie said they've been rewriting the story for years. They just finally said the quiet part out loud. After the call ended, I didn't move. Not for several minutes. My house felt too still. My kids' laughter muffled down the hall suddenly sounded a world away. Because hearing it from someone outside the immediate chaos, someone who had no incentive to lie, made it hit differently. They didn't just exclude us. They lied about why. They justified it. They made me the villain to make themselves comfortable. The realization cracked something open in me, a dam I had spent decades patching with duct tape and hope. I walked to the window and stared out at the frost glazing the grass. Snow flurries drifted like ash. The world looked cold, but inside me something was burning hotter than I'd ever felt before. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat alone at the dining table with every document spread out like a war map. This wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. Quiet, sharp, icy. A line had been crossed, a line they'd pretended didn't exist. And I'd finally reached the point where crossing back wasn't an option. I picked up my phone, opened a blank email, and began drafting something I'd never written before. A boundary. A real one. A final one. I wasn't sure when I would send it, or if I even would, but the words flowed easily. I'm done pretending this is normal. Something strange happened in the days after I ignored my family's calls. Silence. Not peaceful silence, not healing silence. The kind of silence that hits your chest like a cold gust sucking the warmth out while pretending everything is fine. My parents didn't text again. Julia stopped calling. Even extended family, who normally sent meaningless chain messages. Good morning blessings went quiet. It should have hurt. For a moment it did. But then, something unexpected began happening. Life went on. My life. Without guilt. Without obligations. Without constantly bracing for someone else's disappointment. It was like breathing without a weight pressing on my ribs. A week later, I found myself repainting the basement. Not because it needed it, but because for the first time in years, I felt like reclaiming space. Reclaiming myself. The basement had always been the someday project. Someday I'll fix the cracks. Someday I'll hang shelves. Someday I'll make a corner for Zoe to read in and Max to build his Lego towers. But I was always too busy handling emergencies that weren't mine to fix. Not anymore. The fresh navy paint glowed against the lights. Zoe came downstairs, eyes wide. Mom, it looks like a movie room. Max immediately threw himself on the new rug and started rolling like a puppy. And I, someone who'd been stretched thin for years, felt something warm bloom in my chest. Adrian showed up that evening with takeout and a gentle smile. You look different, he said. Different how? Less tired. More you. I exhaled a laugh. That's scary. He shook his head. It's beautiful. We ate on the floor of the unfinished basement, the kids climbing over Adrian like he was a jungle gym. He didn't mind. He kissed the top of my head at one point soft and steady, and the back of my throat tightened. It had been a long time since someone treated me like I wasn't a burden. But the warmth didn't last uninterrupted. Because 2 days later, the universe reminded me that peace often makes certain people restless. That reminder came in a white envelope. I found it in the mailbox sandwiched between a utility bill and a holiday flyer. A letter from a property management company, addressed to me. My pulse ticked upward as I opened it. We have been contacted by Julia Reynolds regarding a transfer of property responsibilities for the Rhodes family cabin. Transfer. I reread the line twice. Then again. Julia hadn't just excluded me. She was now trying to take over the cabin like it was a family recipe she found in the attic. The letter continued. We will need your signature for reassignment of maintenance oversight. I laughed. A short, humorless, disbelieving sound. She had no idea. No idea about the LLC. No idea about the legal structure. No idea about a decade of bills in my name. No idea the cabin legally functioned like a business, and I was the only managing partner. She thought she could just take it. Like she'd taken every ounce of attention since childhood. This is insane, I whispered. Mom Zoe peeked around the corner. Are you laughing or crying? Both, I said truthfully. She nodded in understanding like an 8-year-old sage and walked back to her room. I sat at my dining table with the letter in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt in control. I pulled out my laptop and drafted a response. Polite, professional, cold. The Rhodes family cabin is managed through an LLC under my sole authority as designated by the estate of Charles Rhodes. Attached are legal documents confirming management rights, expenses, tax records, and ownership terms. No transfers or changes can occur without my explicit written consent. I attached every relevant document. Then I clicked send. Not to Julia, to the property manager. I wanted Julia to learn secondhand. Wanted her to feel the confusion first, the embarrassment second, and the consequences third. I didn't want revenge, not the dramatic kind. I wanted understanding. I wanted truth to settle on her like snow, quiet, cold, inevitable. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat with a cup of tea in the dim light of the living room. The letter lay beside me like a discarded threat that had lost its teeth. I thought about every moment I had stepped in for my family. The nights I stayed up fixing that cabin's old heater while Julia posted vacation selfies. The time her teenage dog chewed through the deck rails, and my parents blamed humidity. The weekend I drove 2 hours in a snowstorm to reset the generator because my parents didn't want to leave a movie marathon. And they'd still found a way to call me dramatic, inconvenient, selfish. But now for the first time, the question hit me. What if I stopped fixing things for people who never fixed anything for me? The thought settled into my spine strong and heavy. I didn't need permission to set boundaries. I didn't need validation to walk away. I didn't need their approval to feel worthy. My worth had been in front of me this whole time. Zoe's curiosity, Max's giggles, Adrian's steady presence. My own 2 hands building a life no one helped me with. So when Adrian came over, later that night, uninvited but welcomed, he found me sitting cross-legged on the floor, documents spread around me like a mosaic of my independence. He paused at the sight. What is all that? Proof, I said simply. Proof they never cared to understand. He sat beside me. You don't have to fight them alone. I'm not fighting them, I replied, surprising myself. I'm just done serving them. He nodded, eyes softening, then let them learn. His phone buzzed on the table. I glanced instinctively. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach dip. Lydia, his ex-girlfriend. He silenced it quickly. Too quickly. It's nothing, he said. But exes are never nothing, especially when your life is shifting and suddenly you're aware of every fault line. Still, I didn't ask. I wasn't ready to poke at that yet. I instead leaned my head against his shoulder. And for the first time, I felt the world tilt in my favor. The next morning, my email pinged. Property manager. Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. We were unaware of the LLC structure. We will redirect further communication accordingly. Translation, they shut Julia down. I sipped my coffee, slowly savoring the moment. Then 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a furious text. Julia, what the hell did you do? A smile tugged at my lips. Nothing. Not anymore. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked inside an ivory envelope, thick enough to imply importance. My name was embossed on the front, Ms. Hazel Rhodes. My parents always thought fancy paper could hide ugly truth. Inside an elegant serif font, Rhodes Legacy Weekend, a celebration of family and tradition location, the lake cabin, the very cabin I owned, the cabin they'd tried to take from me, the cabin they hadn't maintained for a decade. I almost laughed. This wasn't a reunion. This was a rebrand, a PR move for my mother, a performance for my father, and a desperate attempt by Julia to pretend nothing had happened. But the fatal mistake was choosing my cabin as the stage. I RSVP'd. Hazel Rhodes plus Zoe plus Max plus one guest. I didn't name the guest. Let them sweat. The silence that followed was delicious. In the 2 weeks before the event, I transformed the cabin not cosmetically, but structurally. I installed a smart lock system with individualized codes, updated the security cameras, had the utilities routed through an app only I controlled, revised the LLC bylaws so they required unanimous consent for any event renovation or transfer. And with the help of my lawyer, Sarah Whitman, drafted a clear, calm, airtight usage agreement. I wasn't planning chaos. I wasn't planning to humiliate anyone. I was planning clarity. If they wanted a legacy weekend, then they would hear the real legacy. The morning of the event, the gravel driveway was crowded. SUVs, sedans, one rented minivan, every branch of the family tree had sprouted into the parking lot, chatting like nothing had ever fractured. I pulled in last. Zoe hopped out holding a handmade gift bag that said Cabin Adventures. Max carried a stuffed fox. And walking beside me was Adrian, warm, steady, his hand brushing mine with unspoken support. As we approached, conversations died, heads turned. Julia froze mid-laugh. She hadn't expected me to come. She definitely hadn't expected me to come with strength radiating off me like armor. Hazel, she said too brightly, you made it. Of course, I replied. Wouldn't miss it. Adrian gave a polite nod. The kids waved. Julia's smile twitched. You brought everyone. You invited the whole family, I said. We're part of that. Her eyes flickered at the word family, but she forced her lips back into a stiff smile. Right. Well, we have a scheduled group photos at noon barbecue at 1. I saw it, I cut in smoothly. Before all that, though, I need everyone inside for a quick announcement. An announcement. That word spread across the crowd like spilled wine. Julia blinked, confused. But she couldn't back out now, not with the picnic tables set up, the decorations already fluttering by the dock, and every relative present. This won't take long, right? She asked. 10 minutes, I said. Maybe less. Inside the living room, everyone gathered awkwardly, sipping lemonade and nudging each other like kids caught in a classroom with no teacher. I stepped onto the coffee table, clapped twice. The room fell silent. Thank you all for coming, I began. It's good to see everyone under one roof again, especially this roof. A few confused chuckles. I continued, voice even steady. As most of you know, this cabin was left to the grandchildren by our grandfather. What many of you don't know is that I've been solely responsible for maintaining funding and legally managing it for the last 10 years. A quiet rumble rolled through the room. Julia looked at my parents, panicked. I held up a folder and began handing out printed reports. This includes taxes, repairs, insurance, utilities, snow removal, and structural work. I've spent a little under $50,000 of my own money and over 1,000 hours of labor keeping this place standing. No one spoke, not even a whisper. Until today, I said I have never asked for reimbursement. I've never asked for recognition. But since this event was planned without my knowledge and on my property, I need to update a few terms. Dad finally found his voice sharp and offended. Hazel, this is not necessary. I looked at him calmly. You made it necessary. Mom's eyes filled, lips trembling. Sweetheart, this isn't how families handle things. No, I said. They usually don't exclude their grandchildren from holidays either. The silence deepened. Hot. Heavy. Julia's face flushed red. You're exaggerating. I turned to her evenly. Did you or did you not ask me to come alone because my kids were disruptive? Her mouth snapped shut. I lifted the stack of laminated cards Sarah had printed. These are digital access codes, I announced. They serve as temporary permission to use the property this weekend. Going forward, anyone wishing to use the cabin must submit a written request and sign a usage agreement. Gasps. Actual gasps. Adrian calmly began distributing the cards. When Julia snatched one, her hand shook. You can't do this. This isn't what Grandpa wanted. I met her stare with the first honest truth I'd said to her in years. Grandpa wanted us to share it. He didn't want one person to be used while everyone else sat back. Somewhere behind me, my cousin muttered, She's right. Mom took a step forward. We just want things to go back to normal. No, I said quietly. You want things to go back to when I did the work and you took the credit. That version of me doesn't exist anymore. Julia opened her mouth, then closed it. Because there it was, the truth, laid bare. No screaming, no chaos, just clarity. Exactly the kind they'd never expected from the daughter they trained to stay quiet. The next 30 minutes were chaos light. Some relatives signed their access forms, immediately relieved. Someone finally took charge. A few tried to argue until they saw the documents. The LLC structure, the legal ownership, the decade of proof. My parents stood in the corner, stunned and aging by the second. Julia stormed outside, halfway through wiping tears angrily with the back of her hand. I didn't follow her. For once, I wasn't chasing after someone else's emotions. Despite the shock, the barbecue still happened. Kids played by the lake. Zoe beat 3 adults at checkers. Max jumped off the dock fully clothed, sending everyone into laughter. Adrian sat with me on the porch swing as the sun dipped behind the trees. He took my hand silently, the kind of gesture that said, I'm here and I mean it. I squeezed back. When people saw us sitting together, my little family of 4, they looked away. Some with guilt, some with respect, some with confusion. But no one looked with pity. Not anymore. As twilight settled, Julia approached me in the gravel driveway. You humiliated me, she said softly, voice shaking. No, I replied. I told the truth. You could have talked to me first. I tried, I said, my entire life. She swallowed hard. So that's it. You're done with us. No, I said, I'm done pretending I owe you. She looked like she wanted to argue, then turned away defeated. I watched her walk back toward the cabin she once assumed was hers. Then I did something I'd never done before. I left first, with Adrian's hand in mine, with my children smiling in the back seat, and with a kind of peace that felt like standing in warm sunlight after years of cold. The drive home from the cabin felt different this time. Not heavy, not suffocating, not like I was dragging the weight of an entire family behind me. For the first time, the road felt open, wide, like my life was finally mine to steer. Zoe hummed in the back seat, swinging her legs. Max slept, holding his wet stuffed fox hair still damp from the lake. Adrian glanced at me occasionally, his thumb brushing my knee as if to say, "I'm proud of you. I'm here." And something inside me, some old rusted part, finally loosened. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not my parents, not Julia, not the extended family who'd watched me carry the emotional, financial, and physical weight of that cabin for a decade and never once asked if I needed help. I was done being the understudy. I was finally the lead in my own story. In the days that followed the reunion, the fallout came quietly like faint aftershocks from a distant earthquake. No group chat messages, no calls, no invitations whenever you're free. Just silence, a different kind this time. Not the silence of punishment, the silence of realization, the silence of consequences. Adrian stayed close through all of it. Not hovering, not smothering, just present. Reliable, the kind of steady presence I'd always been for others, but rarely received in return. One evening, while he washed dishes and I dried them, he said gently, "You handled that with more grace than most people could. I know it wasn't easy." "It was easier than pretending nothing was wrong," I said. He nodded. "You didn't burn the bridge. You just stopped rebuilding it alone." I paused, dish towel in hand, because that felt like truth sharpened into poetry. A week later, Julia texted for the first time since the reunion. "Can we talk?" 3 words. No apology, no recognition of what she'd done, just a vague question designed to pull me back into old patterns. I stared at my phone long enough for the screen to dim. Then I typed, "Not yet." Because I finally understood forgiveness doesn't require access. Healing doesn't require proximity. And family doesn't require suffering. Oddly enough, the one person who didn't reach out was my mother. No tearful voicemail, no long message pretending she didn't know. Just distance. Which told me everything I needed to know. For years, I'd mistaken her silence for neutrality. Now I realized it was complicity. And when complicit silence cracked, there wasn't much underneath. Meanwhile, the cabin became something entirely new, not the place I maintained for them, but the place I reclaimed for myself. Adrian and I drove up one weekend without the kids, armed with plans, tools, and a thermos full of strong coffee. We replaced old fixtures, added new shelving, cleaned out the attic where generations of sentimental junk had collected dust, laughed about how Grandpa would have loved the new smart lock system. "He would have been proud of you," Adrian said, pushing a dusty trunk aside. "For what?" "For not letting anyone take advantage of what he left you, for honoring what he built." I didn't respond right away because my throat tightened unexpectedly. I hadn't realized until then how much I'd craved anyone to acknowledge that I did right by him. By the cabin, by myself, by my kids. By the life I'd built without applause. Around that time, Olivia Morgan from Wyndham Properties, my project lead and friend, invited me to the nearly finished art gallery renovation downtown. It was the biggest project of my career, and she'd been instrumental in pushing me into the spotlight I'd never sought. "You should talk at the opening," she said as we walked through the newly restored hall. "People need to hear your story." I shook my head immediately. "Oh, I don't know, public speaking isn't really—" "It's not about being comfortable," she interrupted kindly. "It's about owning what you created." Her words echoed in my mind the whole drive home. Owning what I created. I thought of the cabin, the business, my children, the boundaries, the silence I'd chosen, the life I'd reclaimed. Maybe it was time I stopped shrinking. A month after the reunion, the gallery opened in a flurry of soft lights, champagne flutes, and quiet classical music. People wore clothes that looked expensive enough to avoid breathing too deeply. Zoe and Max stayed home with a sitter. Adrian held my hand the entire evening. When Olivia introduced me as the lead restoration contractor, the applause felt surreal, not obligatory, not polite, not reluctant. Real. I gave a short speech, nothing dramatic, nothing flowery, just the truth, that restoring old buildings had taught me something important. When a foundation cracks, I said, you don't ignore it. You don't pretend it isn't there. You don't decorate around it. You address it. You repair it. Or you walk away and build somewhere healthier. People nodded. Some clapped. A few even teared up. But the most meaningful reaction came later in the quiet, after the event, when Adrian pulled me close and whispered, "You finally heard yourself." And I had. That night back home, I tucked Zoe into bed. She blinked sleepily at me. Mom, yeah. Are we going to go to Grandma's house again sometime? My heart clenched not from fear or guilt, but from clarity. I brushed her hair back gently. Maybe one day if things get better. But we're not going anywhere. We're not wanted. Zoe nodded thoughtfully as if this made perfect sense. That's good, because they didn't clap for my reindeer song. My breath caught. There it was, the truth I had felt for a year, reflected through the eyes of an 8-year-old. I kissed her forehead. Your song was perfect. You deserve people who clap. She smiled and drifted to sleep. I went to tuck in Max next. He was already half asleep, Fox tucked under his chin. I kissed his cheek. Then I stood in the hallway outside their rooms and let the truth settle deep. I wasn't raising my kids to repeat my patterns. I was raising them to expect better than I ever did. That night, as I lay in bed beside Adrian, his hand warm in mine, I thought about everything that had happened. The exclusion, the caption, the silence, the cabin, the confrontation, the aftermath. And instead of feeling bitterness, I felt something else. Peace, real peace, earned peace. Because I finally understood, I didn't lose a family. I lost a role I was never meant to play. And what I built in its place was stronger than anything they ever offered me. I didn't burn a bridge. I didn't start a war. I didn't destroy anything. I simply built a better home on the other side of the lake. A home with a foundation no one else could crack. A home that was mine.